Our next guest has not only donned many hats in his career, but is an important advocate of creation of public television and broadcasting in his home country. And amidst the conflict with Russia, he is in the perilous position of fighting the campaign of information from his neighboring nation.
So, the big question remains, will Ukraine really succeed in retaining territory, or will Russia prevail? To speak to us about the ramifications of this very conflict, we have with us the Minister of Culture and Information, Ukraine, Mr. Olexander Tkachenko, to speak on the spirit of Ukraine resistance. He's going to be interviewed by Executive Editor Times Now, Padmaja Joshi.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mr. Olexander Tkachenko. It's a difficult time for you to be here in our midst, speaking to us as an Indian audience. Your starting thoughts, even as it's a difficult time for your country, because Russia right now is claiming that they have already taken over Mariupol and their advance towards Kyiv is unhindered. Your opening thoughts, sir.
First of all, greetings to everybody. I would like to thank Times Network for inviting me to this prestigious event. Today a lot of Indian media representatives are here, and I hope the truth about the war in Ukraine, which was started by Russia, is broadcasting in India as well. Informational support of such a big country is very important, big democracy, is very important for Ukraine. Every day the Russian Federation, through their Kremlin propaganda, spreads fakes and disinformation to the world and manipulates facts. So that's why it's really important to know the real truth, especially when Russia cynically tries to hide its crimes and continue genocide against Ukrainian people. Here I am ready to tell all of you the truth about the current situation, and we'll be glad to answer your questions.
Now, this invasion of your country by Russia has gone on for 57 days now. The resistance that your country has offered has been extremely strong. Not many would have thought that Russia would be held off for so long. Let me begin by asking you again about the situation in Mariupol in particular. How long do you believe that your forces can hold out?
First of all, Mariupol still continue resistance, because even one single piece of this area are with Ukrainian soldiers. It means that Mariupol is surrendered, but it's not under the full Russian control. At the beginning of the war, I have been asked by some journalists in how much days Kyiv will give up. And I told them Kyiv will never give up. So I believe that Mariupol will continue resistance, and at least if something goes wrong, we believe that Ukrainian soldiers and civilians who are surrendered by Russian troops right now should be guaranteed a free humanitarian corridor.
Now, it's also said that Ukraine has offered a special round of negotiations on Mariupol with Russia without conditions. What are your expectations? And if Russia was to agree, what is it that you plan to tell them?
That it should be given humanitarian corridor, or Russian troops should withdraw from Mariupol. Because Mariupol is a sort of new Stalingrad, because it's almost completely ruined by Russian troops. Before the war, Ukrainian state invested millions of dollars, $100 million to renovate Mariupol after the first Russian war in 2014. And it was a brilliant city. Now everybody of you can see the pictures of ruined Mariupol. That's what the war of Russia brings to Ukraine: death and ruins.
Now, in the event that Mariupol does fall, it will be the first major city to do so. Of course, its significance cannot be underscored enough given its location. What do you think that this would mean for your resistance?
You know, during the war, we are thinking by information we are receiving day by day. We are not predicting. Our prediction is to win this war, including returning back Mariupol.
Now, you've also negotiated very hard with Western allies for support. Do you believe the United States and the West can do more and could have done more? They have, of course, been giving you arms, ammunition, and also imposed sanctions. But is that adequate to your mind?
First of all, we very much appreciate any assistance that are given by our Western allies, including weapon and sanctions. But what all time continue to repeat our President Zelensky, it's not enough. We need more weapons and we need true embargo for export of Russian oil and gas. And sanctions that does work, complete switch off from SWIFT, for example, and ban of any commercial relationship with Russia. Because Russia in this century started unprecedented war, which last time was on the European continent 80 years ago. And the methods Russia are using against Ukraine have no difference from what Hitler did against nations to which he invaded. That's why I think it's a resistance of all civilized world. And I will be very much grateful if India can support Ukraine in this time of war more actively, because it's the biggest democratic power in the world. And I believe that democratic values for which are Ukrainians fighting, for the right to live, for the right to live in an independent state, also are shared by Indian people.
Now, what happened at the UN Human Rights Council was very significant. Russia lobbied hard with several countries to prevent its suspension from the UNHRC, so much so that there were even videos that the Russian military put out talking about how human rights violations were being done by your troops and that Russian soldiers were being shot in the knee, etc. But despite that, they weren't successful in preventing their suspension from the UNHRC. What do you think that means?
Yes, but from another side, there are a lot of things that can be done. For example, presence of Russia in this period of time in the Security Council with the right of veto, when they can veto any decisions against Russian military invasion in Ukraine, I think it's inappropriate. So there are different ways of legal solution of this issue. For example, Russia is not solely the country which received a right because USSR was collapsed. Russia itself never was a member of United Nations. Ukraine and Belarus was, but Russia didn't. So I think this work of international democratic countries should be continued to take away Russian presence in Permanent Security Council of United Nations and their right of veto.
Now, my next question is particularly important for us because we speak to you here from here in India. Is Ukraine in a position to understand why some countries, especially like ours, who have ties with Russia in defense and trade, would want to adopt an independent course that we have?
We recognize any decisions of independent countries for their courses. The only thing we can do is to appeal and to convince you that to stay away during this war against humanity, against lives of people, probably is not the best way to support democracy. Because if democracy fails in Europe, then it will be a big question about whole democratic values in the world, including India.
Now, India has, of course, condemned the human rights violations in Ukraine repeatedly. It has abstained from the resolution suspending Russia from the UNHRC, and this actually worked against Russia, and it has sent a significant amount of humanitarian aid as well. How do you see India's response so far in total?
I think the same things what our Western allies are doing, stop or limit trade with Russia during this period of time. Because your trade and incomes that can get Russian economy directly goes to military sector and directly kills Ukrainian people. And that probably is one of most important things India, as the biggest democracy in the world, can do right now.
Given your experience in the recent past, has your country now abandoned any aspiration about getting membership of NATO? Will you be completely neutral on that front, or do you believe a commitment to that effect is likely to lead to a de-escalation?
I don't think so. NATO, first of all, do not ask us to join. That's one question. From another hand, Putin clearly indicates his goals. His goal is completely occupied Ukraine and completely ruin our identity, not only in culture spheres, but in all spheres of democracy. He do not see Ukraine on the map of the world. That's his goal. And it doesn't mean whether we can be or not the member of NATO. It means that it's the right of Ukrainians to live their own lives. If 95% of Ukrainians supporting now President Zelensky, it means that he needs to kill 95% of population to convince in his diabolic truth.
So, Mr. Tkachenko, what next? What happens next in the war? How long do you think this standoff is going to go on for?
It's hard. It's 57 days of the war, and each day we're receiving information that Ukrainian people are killed or they are under the pressure on occupied territories. Of course, the main first step for the escalation should be full withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian territory, and then a tribunal like in Nuremberg against those who started this war.
Mr. Olexander Tkachenko, thank you very much for speaking to us, and our thoughts and prayers remain with your country and especially the people of your country. Thank you very much.